The sun was rising slowly over Aba that morning, but inside a small walled house, a young woman named Amaka was already awake. She sat by a wooden table, her eyes heavy with tiredness but burning with determination. Her life had been one long battle. Her father had died when she was just 12, leaving her mother to raise four children alone. Poverty clung to them like a stubborn disease. Her brothers had dropped out of school to work odd jobs. Some even spent nights roaming the streets, chasing after quick money. But Amaka was different. She studied at night with a borrowed candle, writing notes until her eyes ached. Her mother, Mama Ifoma, often told her, "Amaka, my daughter, education is your weapon. Poverty may laugh at us now, but one day you will silence it." Those words became her power. They stayed with her. She promised herself she would work in a big company one day. She would sit in a glass building and wear smart suits, not torn clothes. Her chance came when her well-connected aunt in Lagos told her about a job opening at a multinational company. Amaka applied, and to her shock, she was invited for an interview. That night, she could not sleep. She prayed, "God, let this be my breakthrough." Lagos was a different world. It had tall buildings, endless traffic, and people moving like machines. Amaka clutched her small bag as she walked into the glass tower that housed Globe Tech International. Inside, the air smelled of polish and money. Workers in fine suits moved quickly, their heels clicking against the floor. Amaka felt small in her simple gown and old shoes, but she kept walking. She was placed as a junior assistant in the marketing department. Her boss, Madam Grace, was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and even sharper tongue. "Listen well," Madam Grace told her on the first day. "This company is not a playground. One mistake can cost you your job. And trust me, this company does not forgive carelessness." Amaka nodded quickly, fear gripping her heart. She walked quietly, filing documents, carrying messages, and learning the office culture. Everyone seemed too busy, too important. Nobody paid her any attention. But destiny was quietly waiting for her. Few days later, Amaka was asked to forward a presentation draft to Madam Grace. She typed the email, attached the document, and clicked send. At first, everything seemed normal, but a few minutes later, her phone buzzed. A colleague whispered urgently, "Amaka, what did you just do?" Confused, she checked her sent mail and her heart stopped. She had mistakenly sent the presentation to the CEO of the company instead of Madam Grace. But that was not the worst part. By accident, she had also attached her personal notes, a small document where she had written blunt, unfiltered opinion about the company's poor customer service, weak branding, and wasted opportunities. She had even scribbled a few bold ideas about how things could be better. She panicked. Everyone knew the CEO was a hard man, feared by all. He had fired managers in the past for mistakes smaller than this. Colleagues began whispering, shaking their heads. "She is finished. No one survives this. She just ruined her life." Amaka sat frozen, tears filling her eyes. She thought of her mother back home, her siblings depending on her, all her dreams. gone in one careless click. The next morning, the atmosphere in the office was tense. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened and the CEO himself walked into the marketing floor. He was a tall man in dark suit, his face stern and unreadable. He held a printed copy of Amaka's email in his hand. The entire office froze. Not even a pin could be heard. Who sent this? His voice thundered. Silence. No one dared to breathe. Finally, with trembling legs, Amaka stood up. Sir, it was me. I am very sorry. Her colleagues gasped. Some even covered their mouths. This was suicide. But instead of exploding in anger, the CEO narrowed his eyes at her. Do you know what you just did? He asked slowly. Amaka's lips shook. A mistake, sir. A terrible one. The CEO stared at her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he said, or maybe the smartest thing I have seen this year. The room remained silent as the CEO words hung in the air. Amaka's colleague could not believe what they just heard. Some exchanged glances, their mouths slightly open. Madam Grace, her boss, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes burning with anger. The CEO turned to Amaka. Follow me to my office, he commanded. Amaka's leg wobbled as she trailed behind him. Inside the elevator, she could hear her own heartbeat. She expected him to tear into her once they were alone, but he said nothing. He simply pressed the button to the top floor. His office was massive. Glass windows stretched across the walls, giving a perfect view of the city. Amaka had never seen such a place in her life. The CEO walked to his desk, sat down, and placed her email on the table. Then he looked directly at her. You wrote things most people here are too afraid to say, he said. Do you believe these ideas of yours can actually work? Amaka froze. She had written those notes casually, never imagining anyone important would read them. Yet here she was, standing before the most powerful man in the company. She swallowed hard. Yes, sir, I believe that they can work. The CEO himself leaned back, studying her. Then, to her shock, he said, I want you to present this at the next board meeting. Amaka blinked. Sir, me? At the board meeting? Yes, next week, he said firmly. Prepare yourself. Her head spun. A junior staff, barely few weeks into the company, being asked to present before directors and shareholders. It was either the biggest opportunity of her life or the trap that would destroy her completely. That night, Amaka could not sleep. She lay on her small bed in her one-room apartment, staring at the ceiling. What if I embarrass myself, she thought. What if they laugh at me? What if they say I don't know anything? Her fear grew heavier with every thought. But then she remembered her mother's word. Amaka, fear is what keeps poor people poor. If you want to change your life, speak boldly. She sat down, wiped her tears, and whispered, I will not be afraid. I will do this. The following days, she prepared like never before. She borrowed a laptop from a colleague and worked late into the night. She practiced in front of her mirror, pretending to face an audience. Sometimes, she broke down and cried, thinking of her poor mother and siblings who were praying for her success. Then she would stand up again, determined not to fail. Meanwhile, in the office, Gossip spread like wildfire. She thinks she is special now. She will disgrace herself and the CEO. She won't last, someone said. But Amaka kept her head down. She knew the board meeting would either make her or destroy her. The day arrived. The boardroom was like nothing she had ever seen before. Long polished table, leather chairs, and a massive screen for presentations. Around the table sat the company's directors, shareholders, and senior managers. Amaka felt their eyes on her as she entered. Some looked amused, others looked irritated. She heard a faint whisper. Who is she? A cleaner? What is she doing here? She wanted to run, but her legs carried her forward. The CEO stood and introduced her. This is Amaka, a new staff member. She has some ideas I believe are worth hearing. Amaka, the floor is yours, he said. Amaka's hand trembled as she set up her slides. For a moment, her voice refused to come out. Then she remembered her mother's word again. She took a deep breath. She began to speak. At first, the directors barely listened. Some checked their phones, but as she continued, their heads slowly lifted. Her ideas were bold and practical. New markets to enter, simple changes to customer service, innovative marketing strategies that could save millions. Her voice grew stronger with each word. She was no longer the timid girl from Aba. She was a visionary. When she finished, the room went silent. Then suddenly, there was an applause. The CEO nodded with satisfaction. From today, he announced, Amaka will join the strategy team. Amaka stood frozen, tears burning in her eyes. She had just stepped into a new life. But little did she know, the applause was hidden enemies. Amaka's promotion spread across the company like wildfire. Some congratulated her, others whispered behind her back, saying, she must have something going on with the CEO. How can a junior staff jump so fast? She will not last long. No one was more furious than Madam Grace. She felt insulted that her assistant had bypassed her authority. She will regret this, Madam Grace hissed to a colleague. I will make sure of it. Amaka noticed the coldness, but she brushed it aside. She was too focused on her new role. She worked tirelessly, bringing fresh ideas to the table. Slowly, she began to earn respect, but enemies were watching closely, waiting for the right moment to strike. For weeks, Amaka threw herself into her new role. She stayed late at the office, working on marketing campaigns and strategic plans. Slowly, her confidence grew. The CEO often called her to his office for updates, which made other staff suspicious. Gossip spread like wildfire. She is definitely sleeping with him. That's how she got here, not by brains. She won't last, just wait. Madam Grace, still burning with anger, decided it was time to strike. She joined forces with two directors who had their own reasons to hate Amaka. Her boldness had exposed their incompetence. Late one evening, Madam Grace sat with them in a dimly lit lounge, not far from the office. This girl thinks she is special, Madam Grace said bitterly. But she is just a child who doesn't know her place. One of the directors said, then let's teach her a lesson she will never forget in her life. They hatched a plan. They would frame Amaka for leaking sensitive company information with fake documents and twisted emails. They would make it look like she was selling secrets to competitors. it was only a matter of time. A few weeks later, Amaka was put in charge of a major project, negotiating a contract worth billions. She worked tirelessly, determined to prove herself. But one morning, everything changed. She arrived at the office to find chaos. People were whispering, pointing at her. Her laptop was missing from her desk. Before she could ask questions, two stern-looking security men approached her. "Come with us," one said firmly. Amaka's blood ran cold. "Why? What happened?" she asked. They didn't answer. They escorted her to the CEO's office. Inside, the CEO sat behind his desk, his face dark and unreadable. On the table lay a set of printed documents. "Amaka," he said slowly, "what is this?" She stepped closer and froze. They were copies of emails that looked like she had leaked confidential information about the company's contract. Her heart dropped. "Sir, this is not me. I never wrote those." The CEO's eyes pierced into hers. "This came from your account." Amaka shook her head desperately. No, I swear. Someone must have." "Enough!" He cut her off. His voice was cold. "I gave you an opportunity, Amaka, but betrayal, I cannot forgive." Her legs gave way. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, sir, you know me. I would never do this." But it was useless. The decision had been made. The CEO pressed a button on his phone. The security men stepped forward. "Escort her out of this place," he said. And just like that, Amaka was dragged out of the office. Her colleagues watched in silence. Some pitied her. Others were happy and whispering, "I told you, she won't last." Her lifetime opportunity had turned into her worst nightmare. That evening, Amaka sat alone in her small room, her face buried in her hands. She felt broken. How could this happen? She thought. Why me? She thought of her mother back home, waiting for good news. She thought of her siblings who believed she would change their future. Now everything was gone. Days turned into weeks, and Amaka sent messages to the CEO, begging him to believe her. But there was no reply. She applied for other jobs, but none came through. The shame was too much. Neighbors whispered whenever she passed. Even her aunt, who had helped her get the job, avoided her calls. It seemed her story had ended in a tragedy. But destiny was not finished with her yet. 3 months later, Globe Tech International announced record of profits. The strategies Amaka had presented during her first board meeting had begun to bear fruit. Investors were impressed. They wanted to know who had brought this idea. The CEO, pressured by questions, began to suspect something was wrong. He ordered a private investigation into Amaka's so-called betrayal. What the investigator uncovered shocked him to his core. The emails had been forged. Fake accounts, manipulated documents, all traced back to Madam Grace and the 2 directors. The CEO's face hardened as he read the report. He had made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and there was only one way to fix it. He picked up his phone and dialed Amaka's number. Amaka was in her small room, folding clothes to sell at the market for survival, when her phone rang. She almost ignored it. Scammers had been disturbing her lately, but when she looked at the screen, her heart skipped. Unknown number. She hesitated. Then she answered. "Hello?" "Amaka," a deep voice said. Her chest tightened. She knew the voice. Sir, she whispered. It was the CEO. I need you to come to the office tomorrow morning, he said flatly. There's something we must discuss. Before she could ask questions, the line went dead. Her hands shook. What could this mean? Another humiliation? Or maybe a chance? The next morning, Amaka walked into the glass building, where she had once been paraded out like a criminal. Staff stared in shock. Some whispered, others smirked. See her, she came back. She has no shame. Maybe she's here to beg again. But she kept walking. The receptionist, unsure of what to do, quickly phoned upstairs. Minutes later, a security officer escorted her to the CEO's office. Inside, the CEO sat stiffly at his desk. He didn't smile. He didn't even greet her warmly. He just slid a flat file across the table to her. Amaka opened it. Her eyes widened. It was the investigation report. Proof that Madam Grace and the other two directors had framed her. Her knees grew weak. Tears filled her eyes. Sir, you believe me now? The CEO leaned back. His voice was calm but firm. I made a mistake, a big one. I judged you too quickly. I want to make it right. Amaka held her breath. I am offering you your job back, he continued. But you must understand, if you return, you will face enemies stronger than before. They will not rest until you fall. The question is, are you ready to fight? Amaka closed her eyes. She thought of her mother. She thought of her siblings. She thought of the girl who once studied under candlelight in Aba. When she opened her eyes, she was filled with fire. I will fight, she said. Amaka returned to the company, not as a victim, but as a warrior. Her enemies tried to intimidate her. Documents went missing from her desk. Rumors spread daily. She was insulted in meetings, but she refused to bend. Instead, she grew sharper, smarter. She kept records of everything. She learned how the company's politics worked. Quietly, she began gathering evidence of corruption. One day, she walked into a board meeting with a folder. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice steady. Before we continue, I have something important to present. The room went silent as she revealed shocking evidence. Madam Grace and two directors had been embezzling money for years. Gas filled the air. Faces turned pale. The CEO slammed his hand on the table. Guards, arrest them. Madam Grace tried to protest, but it was too late. She and the directors were dragged out in disgrace. Amaka had not only cleared her name, she had destroyed her enemies. Weeks later, Globetech International celebrated its biggest contract in history. At the center of it all was Amaka. The CEO called her to his office once again, but this time his expression was different. Soft, almost proud. You remind me of myself when I was young, he said, courageous, fearless, willing to fight against all odds. He stood up, walked to the window, and continued. I will not be CEO forever. The company needs someone with vision, someone unafraid to make mistakes. Amaka, when I retire, I want you to take over. Amaka was surprised. Me? CEO? But sir, I am just... He raised his hand. You are not just anything. You turned a mistake into an opportunity. Then you turned betrayal into victory. That is leadership. Tears rolled down Amaka's cheek. She fell to her knees overwhelmed, and so it was decided. Amaka, the girl who once studied under candlelight in a leaking house in Aba, became the youngest CEO Globe Tech had ever had.